Good afternoon. Welcome to Art Basel Miami Beach, Salon Talks. This is the last talk of the week, so it's always a very special talk for us. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Carson Chang, came from New York to do this talk, and then, yes, Christian Falsnaes, an artist who came all the way from
Berlin.
All the way from Berlin. All right, thanks guys.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having us to Art Basel Miami Beach. And I think, as you'll see, that the presentation that we're going to give today, the conversation we're going to give, perhaps will be kind of pretty timely in terms of what's happening in the United States right now, with all the protests happening throughout the country, and even in Miami with the kind of protests that happened here that stopped the traffic. You'll find that, in fact, these questions of public uprising, of control mechanisms, of social dynamics is very much part of Christian's work. My name is Carson Chan, and I'm an architecture curator and writer. And Christian is originally from Denmark, but has been based in Berlin for the last several years. And you'll see in two of the works that he's going to show in a short video clip, that his work deals a lot with the transformations of social dynamics and into different forms. So Christian, in his performances, he organizes people, he gets them to do things collectively, he gets them inspired, and then to make things together. I think one reason why Christian asked me to speak with him here is because of a performance that he did in Berlin, I think 2 years ago, called Elixir at PSM Gallery. And I'll just describe the performance to you, and I was in the audience and also as a participant. But what happened was the gallery space was divided into two, and and you can correct me if I'm wrong, and half the gallery attendees were asked to be in one room, and the other half were in the other room. And I was in the half where we're sitting and watching the people in the other room through video camera. And what happened in the room where people were, I was watching, Christian was kind of having people chant the word elixir, and then have them spray paint onto a wall, and then eventually break that wall down, and then make it into kind of signs, right? So, and then ask us in the other room to also spray paint. And all this is done kind of, and you'll see in the video, very much trying to, as a kind of a protest leader kind of way. And I was sitting in the front, and he handed us all spray paint bottles and asked us to write elixir. And I was just like, well, I'm not gonna just do whatever you say. So I just sprayed "fuck you" on it. And that elicited a kind of reaction, and we started a conversation about the politics of how do you ask someone to do things, how do you make someone do things, how do you force people to do things, and what kind of reactions can you elicit. So maybe we can go see some video clips. Do you want to describe what we're going to look at?
Yeah, so I want to show two videos, or two short excerpts from videos to exemplify a little bit what kind of work that I'm doing. The first one I'm going to show you is an excerpt from a video that was recorded in the KW Institute for Contemporary Art in Berlin last year, and I was recording a music video at the opening and made the audience who attended the opening perform the choreography for the music video. So I had a pre-recorded song that I produced, and I told people at the opening that we were going to record a music video for that song together, and then I started to give them instructions, and I had a camera team and so on. So maybe you can play the music video.
All right. If I could get your attention for a short moment. I have written and recorded a song, and we will make a clip for that song. So the first part of that music video is a very, very simple choreography that all of you perform at the same time. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1.
Look around in the underground to find a train in a place where it might stay. If there is a place and there is a train, I know there is a way. I wanna know how to get in, to have a key or cut a fence. I gotta find that train and how to get out. I wanna know how to get in, to have a scout or bribe a guard. I know it might be hard, and how to get out again.
This is a quite good example of the way I work. I see the audience as my main material, so most of the times I try to find different ways to engage the audience to become a part of my works. And in this case, I use the recording of a music video as a purpose for the audience to engage in. But actually, what I'm more interested in is the interaction between me and the audience and how I make them comply with that setup in a way. I want to show one more video before we get into the conversation and the discussion, just so that you have a little bit an idea of the different forms that these works can take. The second video is recorded also in Berlin in a museum called Haus am Waldsee. It was the opening of a group exhibition that I was participating in, And this intervention at the opening was my contribution to the exhibition. And it's also about working with the crowd, and it's also about how to make the crowd react to and respond to the setup that I'm creating, but in a very, very different way. The first 1.5 minutes of the video, you just see the situation at the opening. That's a pretty important part of the video because you need to understand what kind of context it's happening in. But maybe we could see the second video, the syntax error. Thank you.
Ich danke ihr und Katja Blomberg für den fantastischen Katalog, der auch eine sehr anschauliche Einführung in die Philosophie Kierkegaards geworden ist. Ich danke Ihnen, euch beiden, sehr herzlich für die sehr harmonische, fruchtbare, erfolgreiche Zusammenarbeit.
In Zusammenarbeit erstmal mit Bettelin und jetzt besonders hier mit dir, Katja, und das war eine Liebesfreude und ein sehr, sehr interessanter Erlebnis und Reise und ich danke dir herzlich.
Yeah! Woo! Yeah! Yeah! Woo! Yeah! What's up? Can you hear me? Are you with me? Are you with me right now? All right! You have a problem with me or what right now? What happened here, man? Okay, guys. Okay, let's get some space. Move! Move! Get away! Back here! Move! Move! What's this all about? Yeah! You want some? All right, boys! Back off! Okay, guys. Are you ready to dance? Yeah! Are you ready to dance? Yeah! Okay! Yeah! Then let's dance! 1, 2, 3, go! Okay, boys. Stop. Stop. Okay, just stand. Just stand and look at the people. Right now, we are here. We are present in the moment right now. So I ask you one question. Are you with me? Come on. Are you with me? Are you with me? Come on. Yeah.
that's good. Und nach dem Steck alle mal, Sie merken, was in den dänischen Künstlern steckt. Ein Künstler, Falsnaes, der eine Performance gemacht hat und der gerne performativ, massenagitatorisch vorgeht. Kierkegaard hatte es ja nicht mit den Massen, sondern mit dem Individuum, das sich um das Subjekt kümmert.
So basically I was training a group of 10 men like a week beforehand, and the only one who knew that this was going to take place was the curator of the exhibition, and then we basically just stopped the opening and created this like very short moment of emergency, you can say, and then as quickly as it started it was over again, and then the opening took its normal course. So hereby the state of normality within that context became visible, you could say.
I think so many questions asked already from just watching these two videos, but just to back up a little bit, can you tell us about how your art began? So I know you started in Copenhagen doing a lot of street art, and so the idea of kind of civil disobedience or resistance to society was already part of from the very beginning. And maybe you can also talk a bit about your method or the techniques that you've honed to kind of organize and manipulate a crowd. As I was coming here in the airport, I found this book called On Leadership, like 10 things that successful leaders do. And it seems that a lot of the techniques in here, so how to motivate people, how to manipulate people, how to use the word we a lot when speaking, seems to be something that you've instinctively been kind of doing. Maybe, yeah, tell us from the beginning how it started.
Yeah, so, okay, first thing first, it's completely true. I started before I was even doing art. I started my creative career by painting trains in Copenhagen. And painting trains, I think, is on one hand a very performative activity, because the circumstances under which you paint are so specific that there is a lot that you have to react to, and the circumstances under which you paint end up being more important than what you actually paint when you have that time limit. You know, you have to take care of security, you have to cut through fences and all of that stuff. And as you also mentioned, I think that through making graffiti, I also got that kind of idea of not accepting the stage that is given to me, or the situation that is given to me, but more having this idea of if there's something I want, I can just do it, I can just create it. I don't need to ask for permission, I don't need to do it officially, I can just go out and take what I want, or try to create the situation that I want. So I think that plays a very important role still in my work. And regarding the techniques of crowd control, of course you can compare the techniques of leadership or the techniques of gurus or even of rock stars or stuff like that to my techniques, but that was not the way I got to make these things. I started to have ideas of big collective actions that I wanted to do. So basically I developed those techniques in order to make the audience do what I want. So it was not my initial idea to test out leadership techniques, but just asking, okay, how can I how can I create this situation that I want like as easy and as fast as possible. And relatively quickly I found out that the way that was the easiest and the most efficient for me to do it was to just display a high level of authority and a high level of certainty. So for example, I very quickly stopped asking people if they want to take part or if they want to do this or that, and started to tell them to do this and that. I very quickly started to adapt the body language, where I will make my body big, so I will take my arms out here and I will start to speak loudly, and by doing that I already assert a very high level of authority in the room, and I will very quickly gain the attention of all the people. And then I have like small things. For example, I will start out by telling them, okay, right now you and me are going to do a performance. We are in this together. And then I will ask them to say yeah, you know, so all of you just say yeah to being a part of it. And then all the people say yeah, and then they already made a kind of mental contract with me of participating. And then I slowly rises from there and introduce more and more tasks and yeah.
Maybe just to give a little kind of sample of what are the things that you've made people do, you've made your audience do. You've made them kind of pick you up and use your head as a paintbrush and paint on the wall. You've made them cut your clothes off until you're standing there naked. You've made them run around the city chanting things. What are some other things, you know, for the audience that don't know your work?
Or you already mentioned the spray paint on the wall of the gallery in Curator, but what I did in the end was to take everybody outside on the street and make them spray paint the whole wall like illegally on the street. So also there's very often these transgressive elements where people also have to overcome their own comfort zone. Or I create, like you saw in the music video, dance choreographies that people have to do, stuff like that.
I think this idea of comfort zone and watching a performance that is inherently uncomfortable is that itself is a tool that you use. I was mentioning earlier that, you know, if you look at the list of fears that people have, it's public speaking and number two is nudity. And you use both. You've done public speeches where you're standing there naked. And so I guess the reaction is people in the audience would be watching, feeling almost embarrassed for you. I guess my question is, what you pick the top two fears that people have. How can you transgress that? You know, like what more can you do to push people into feeling embarrassed for you?
Yeah, but also when we talk about being transgressive or leaving the comfort zone or going into new states or new situations, I always felt that it was very important for me as the artist of that piece to go like in the front myself. I don't want to stand somewhere and make fun of the audience and make them do embarrassing things. So even if they also might do an embarrassing thing, I will be the first one to do it. So by crossing the borders quickly myself, I also allow myself to become something like a projection surface for the fears and the ideas of the audience. So they see me and then they reflect themselves in me, and that makes it kind of okay for them to afterwards take those steps themselves.
And do they know they're being filmed the whole time?
I always, if there is a film being made, I do not always record videos, but very often the videos are a big part of the performances. I will mostly tell the audience in the beginning that we are going to record a video. So I will tell them, this is the camera team, we are recording a video. And then I will mostly even ask them, so are you ready to be in the video? And then people will respond with a yes. And again, then they already made this kind of psychological contract to be filmed.
I think another thing that I find interesting about your work is the difference between conviction and ideology. And that you're through these techniques of shouting, of having people say yes and confirming and clapping, you can easily get people feeling a sense of conviction to whatever cause you're asking them to do, whether or not they know what that thing is. how does this, and I mentioned, the protests and the kind of civil disobedience happening right now in the United States. How do you see the relationship between conviction ideology in your work and also, represented larger, or is that not something you think about?
I mean, that's I would say is the big difference between an actual protest and my work, that I never kind of promote any certain ideology. So there is no content in my performances. So if I take people out to demonstrate on the street or to spray paint walls, it's never for a specific reason other than doing it. And what I find interesting in focusing on the language of the protest or the collective action rather than the content is that it becomes possible, I think, for the audience to reflect on what it does to you, because that's also the power of the art context. That this is a piece of art. You're not demonstrating because of a political agenda or something like that. So you can take part in the action and you can notice what it does to you emotionally. I think that standing in a group of people shouting or going out on the street and blocking traffic or displaying like excessive joy, like chanting and cheering, stuff like that, it's immensely powerful. It has so strong psychological result, physiological, it just does a lot to you. And I think normally when we are engaged in that type of activities, we focus so much on the content that we actually forget to notice how much the actual aesthetics of the situation influence us. So I try to create a frame where you can take part and focus on the experience of doing it, I would say.
I think it's a really great point, because if we see the recent protests like the climate march, just before the UN special meeting on the climate, and even the protests are happening now, you have we can think of the Occupy movement as well. The people in these protests have very different reasons for being there. At the climate march, you have at the front you have the indigenous people, and then there's the kind of house cleaners of America, and then the hip hop caucus, and so the form of the protests is there, many people together, but the reasons why people are there can be varied, and I think that's sort of what you're pointing out, is that it doesn't really matter why you're there, but the form of it has a certain kind of drive and aesthetic to it as well. You mentioned doing this in an art context and the kind of power that gives you. But I think the flip side of that too is that people can see what you do merely as art, merely as a kind of performance, and not read the political potential behind some of these ideas. Your thoughts?
Actually, that's a pretty important aspect of the work for me. It's pretty important for me that it doesn't become political in the way that it is trying to promote any political agenda. So if even though it can be seen as an entertainment, I think that it's still a kind of entertainment that creates a certain awareness of your role within a certain ritual. So it's more about focusing on the construction of social rituals rather than using those social rituals to gain any specific purpose. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I know. I guess I was more asking that, because you're saying people can watch you and watch these things and be part of these things, and in a sense rehearse the feeling of being engaged. But on the flip side of that is that maybe they don't feel that they're rehearsing a certain kind of political engagement or civic engagement, but they're rehearsing a form of having fun. So it's kind of, it's that line that you draw, I think, that it could flip one way or another.
Yeah, but I think to a certain degree, when we engage in group rituals and social dynamics of that sort, there's also always an aspect of theater to it. There's always an aspect of performing it, even if you're not aware about it. I mean, if you go to a concert, the way you behave it's already like pretty predefined how you're supposed to behave, and you don't question why you behave like that, just as when you go to a demonstration. So I think, and I don't think it's a problem having fun doing it, or like it being only theater, as long as the experience of participating in it can make you aware about the mechanics behind it.
And I think the other thing that's kind of interesting too is that by using the form of resistance, but subverting it at the same time, I think you're reaching at a pretty important point. Is like, how do we address the fact that so much in our lives are kind of organized by things beyond the nation state or power structures, and that maybe by addressing it through comedy, through performance, we're able to do that. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the context of doing these things at an art fair, because you did also freeze with the headphones.
Art Basel.
Art Basel, right? Sorry. With this headphone piece, and also the work that you did for this fair. Maybe you can tell us about the headphone piece. I thought that was it was interesting because it was a series of headphones where visitors could put on, and they were given instructions, and they followed the instructions, including taking their clothes off, right? And this was in a booth at a fair like this, but in Basel. So maybe walk us through how that happened.
Yeah, so basically there was 5 headphones, and each headphone had a different set of instructions, but they were all synchronized. So if you would go into the booth and put on one of the headphones and then follow the instructions that you were giving, you would automatically become part of this weird choreography. And there was not really any goal for that choreography. The situations were changing all the time. So like at one time you would have to go and hug some of the others, then immediately afterwards you would have to chant certain words, then you would have to do dance, then you would have to undress, then you would have to, all these kind of things, and they were like never ending seemingly. Of course it was a 2-hour loop, so if you would be there for 2 hours you would get the loop, but there was never this idea of, this is where we are going. Just it had this absurdity to it where you could just go in and take part as long as you want, and then step out of it again, and then another one could take your place. And that work was like perfect for the art fair, because what I found interesting about that work was that the instructions are the same, like all day long, every day long, but depending on who goes into it and how they react to the instructions, completely different situation occurs. Like some people would dress up or take their clothes off and dancing, and they would be screaming, and they would be there for 2 hours and like go into it as an experience, while others would like refuse to act and like stand there with the arms crossed, and like all of these reactions was actually what the piece was about for me. So to have that fluctuation of an art fair was perfect for that piece. And here it was a little bit different, because I have a piece now in the public sector, a sculpture, we showed that in the beginning, that was created during the opening night, where the people attending the opening was destroying this architectural structure, spray painting it and then rebuilding it into a new sculpture. And there it was more confined. It was not this fluctuation, it was like within the context of that opening party. But of course, what is always interesting for me as an artist with an art fair like that is this condensed attention that you have within very short time. So you have like all these people coming to look at this within very short time, and that's something you can work with, especially if you, like me, work with the audience.
I mean, your work lies in the relational aspect and how people react to you and to the situation that they're given, right? So within the context of an art fair or even in an art gallery, 2 questions. One is, how do you, thinking back to how you began, as a doing street art, this idea of resistance, how do you resist your work from being commodified? And I guess the other question is, how do you promote it as a commodity?
I mean, I cannot, I don't resist it being commodified. My works are commodified. I sell works. And I also don't think that's a problem. I work very deliberately with trying to find different formats of selling my work. So, for example, this headphone piece is very simple to buy because you just get the headphones and you can put it up everywhere, and then it will run no matter what context you put it in. And it will run very different depending on which context you put it in. So I like the idea that other people can take control over that work and put it up somewhere else. You know, they can put it up in their apartment or they can put it up in a park, but it's beyond my control. And I like the idea that a collector of a work also takes responsibility over the work. I also, for example, in my recent gallery exhibition in PSM in Berlin, there's one piece, a performance that you as a buyer can learn to do. So if you buy that piece, I will do a workshop with you and teach you how to do that performance. And then it's up to that buyer if they will show that piece at all, and when and where they will show it. And as I said again, I like the idea that a work like that can take form that I didn't even think of that it could take, and that other people are able to perform the pieces and so on. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, but I guess a big part of your work is this kind of surprise or forcing people into situations that they don't anticipate. But if you purchase that, then you anticipate it already, right? So
yeah, but that person could perform the piece in a place where it's not anticipated. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to, instead of me being the only one having that power, having that control, I try to spread it out and let other people be able to do similar things, because actually my personality is not so important in these works. I mean, I'm the one doing it, of course my person has a certain kind of focus, but I do believe that anybody could step out of the crowd and be able to do a performance like that.
It's almost like licensing people to do performances. Yeah. I don't know, I think we're almost at time, but well, there's a question.
Is there another mic? Do we have another mic?
This is a quick question, and then a follow-up question depending on your answer. Is the video actually a commodified, that's an actual piece you're selling, the video installed?
Yes, it is. I have a certain camera team that I work with, and I mean, it's very obvious, for example, with the music video. I have a script before the video is recorded, so the camera team becomes a part of the performance, and the recording of the video is like a central part of it.
Okay, I assumed as much, I just wanted to make sure, because I think one of the more poetic aspects of the second film, and more compelling, it was fascinating, those panning shots at the end and seeing the crowd's reaction, to me was quite telling and quite relevant to this sort of passive-aggressive culture that we live in, that it almost, by doing this performance, the implication, when you see the people looking at each other for reassurance and how to respond to it, it was pretty interesting, I thought. And even though it was in the context of an art opening, you still weren't confident enough to so maybe it's not a question as much about observation. Have you seen that in your work? I mean, that must be a powerful thing, because it's sort of teaching people to recognize these rituals, perhaps.
Yeah, and that's also a reason why it is important for me to do a video, because that video then makes it possible to have a different kind of analytical approach. And even for the people who were there at the performance then can come back to the exhibition and look at the video. And I think you see different details than when you're present in the moment. And also it's very deliberate in that video to have the whole section before and the whole section afterwards. So you see the context, the social ritual that is established by the opening, then you see the disruption, and then you see how it's slowly getting back to normal. But of course it's not really going back to normal, because you cannot forget that one moment of emergency in between.
And then a funny thought, there was a big guy at the end of the video, it looked like he wasn't in the video the whole time until the end? Did he just jump in and start raging with you guys?
No, he was in from the beginning. Yeah.
So I was curious if people do.
You just don't see everything in the video because it's like one camera moving through the crowd and there's like 10 men controlling the whole situation. But
what's interesting too that you show in these videos that we saw is how comparable a music video is to a kind of public disruption. You know, and that everything from these protests to these kind of interventions to music videos and other kind of marches, they're so mediagenic, you know, that they make more sense as a kind of spectacle than as any kind of political agent, right? Yeah, I guess that would be a cynical way of.
With the music video, it's the same for me. It's like making people experience what it's actually like to stage a spectacle like that. Because when you watch a music video, it's like, it's so staged, but you just get the feeling. But when you actually yourself stage that choreography just because a guy tells you to do it, then suddenly the whole absurdity of such a situation becomes very visible and very experienceable, I think.
Have you ever been arrested?
Yes.
Because of this?
No, not because of this. It was like at the time where I was still doing graffiti.
Has it ever gotten out of control? People demandatory?
Actually, by the second video I showed here, it was just on the border of getting out of control. I mean, I had been training these men very carefully, and they all knew like where was the border. But because that language and that situation is so strong, because it's so powerful, it does things with you to take part in an action like that. So suddenly they would cross borders that they didn't think before that they would do. They were like getting out of control themselves. So, for example, there was one guy who just, you know, it all happened very spontaneously. One guy was taking a glass of wine out of the hands of an old lady and pouring it into her face and screaming at her. And one guy would take a glass and throw into the crowd, and actually a little girl got caught on her leg. And these were like things that I didn't want to happen. But because I opened this Pandora's box of that kind of behavior, then suddenly it spiraled and they made each other act more strongly and more powerfully than they initially thought they would do. So I had the feeling with this piece, okay, this is like going into grounds that I have to be careful of.
How would you start to, now that you've observed this piece a few times, do you find that there are techniques in which you can kind of control those things as well? Those kind of eruptions?
I think that's very difficult to control. I mean, because the thing is that I cannot control how the people react to it. So it can escalate just because, but I mean, of course I can control it much better than a regular bar brawl or something like that. So I think it's still like within my control, but I just felt like, okay, this is getting close to things that I can't control.
How would you say that, do you think these pieces would work outside of an art context? So let's say that it wasn't an art opening and that you weren't doing these things in museums and galleries. Do you think you would still be able to focus people and their wills? Or is it the art context specifically?
Yes, that's very specifically. I did several experiments with trying to do stuff like that in other contexts. There was this Falsnaes in Germany, like out in the countryside, where the local people are celebrating once a year and drinking beer. And I just ran into this big tent where there was like 2,000 farmers basically drinking beer, and just jumped up on a table and said, all right everybody, now we're doing like this and that didn't work. I mean, the authority that the art context gives me is a big part of me being able to do these things. And also I think, for example, the second piece, it wouldn't be interesting for me if it would just turn into a bar brawl. It's only interesting because it takes a short while and then it ends, and then people realize, okay, it's an art performance, and then they start that reflection that wouldn't come if it's just like a fight or an actual riot or something like that.
Any more questions? On that note, let's return back to the art context, and thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you very much.